abduction, starting position, you have your hand resting on the pinky side, and your thumb is in an abducted position. So this is palmar abduction for everyone. CMC palmar abduction as far as for review. This is radial, out to the radial side. This is palmar, up from the palm. So she's resting on her small finger. So I'm going to have her in the starting position with her thumb abducted to the side. I'm going to find where that first and second metacarpal meet, where the snuff box is. Once again, very important to know where your snuff box is. So my axis is the snuff box. So I'm going to put my axis on the snuff box. Good. And then I'm going to go ahead and have her come out into palmar abduction. Good. My stationary arm is in line with that second metacarpal. And then my movable arm is in line with that first metacarpal. Once again, I use my finger to really have that nice straight line as far as where that first metacarpal is. So I'm parallel with that first metacarpal. So she has 45 degrees of palmar abduction. Once again, if you want to keep your finger on the axis, go ahead and do the motion. Good. And then you line up with that second metacarpal stationary arm, movable arm with that parallel with that first metacarpal. Good. 45 degrees. Palmar abduction. See how she's nice, stabilized on the table? There's one joint that's moving, everything else is pretty stabilized. Okay.
What's functional range for that?
What's norm?
You know what? I'm gonna look at your book. I'll add that to the
Lecture. It's in your book though.
Okay.
So when you're making your
the
graphs,
problem is that
everything's different.
everything is different. So if we use one, you know, I have my norms that I use, but it's not what your book says.
I have 45. That's my norm. So people have 45. But I'm going to say that, and then the book's going to say like 90, and I'm going to be wrong. So
Let me grab the book, and then I'll be able to tell you that.
all right, we're going to go ahead and move into radial abduction. So starting position, the hand is flat on the table. Once again, my snuff box is where the first and second metacarpal meet. So my snuff box is my axis. All right, and I have my finger there. My stationary arm is in line with that second metacarpal, so I'm on the dorsal side of the hand now. So second metacarpal is my stationary arm. Good, and go ahead and bring that thumb out for me like an L. Good. Once again, I can put my finger there if I need that more of a concrete line. And then my movable arm is parallel with that first metacarpal, right in line with that first metacarpal. So she has 55 degrees of radial abduction. Once again, don't really look at that thumb because most people can hyperextend at their MP joints, right? So I'm really looking at that first metacarpal. These are very fine motions and movements, so really grab one of us to really show if you're doing it the correct way.
And the norm for palmar is 70 degrees, and the norm for radial is 80 degrees.
Can you tell I work with older people usually?
I would never have said that.
Yeah. But like I have quite a bit of radial abduction. As you age, a lot of times you start getting tightness of your muscles and arthritic, especially in this joint. So it's very common for that to be less and less as you get older. Not saying Cindy's older than me, but
Okay, let's see who's got more, okay?
I know you play the piano. But, okay, whew, one more. All right, moving on. Thumb opposition, forearm supinated, wrist is in neutral. So you're going to use a ruler, not a goniometer. But look, there's a little ruler here on your goniometer, so it's going to work for me. But I guess technically you're supposed to use a ruler. Well, can they use the goniometer?
Use the goniometer.
Okay. So you are going to be measuring the difference between the IP and the thumb. The IP of the thumb to the third metacarpal head. All right. So I'm going to line up I'm going to be on my third metacarpal head. Good. I'm going to measure it in centimeters right here. So right on that third metacarpal head. So what you're doing is you're bringing your thumb up and over to my ruler. And that hand staying flat. Okay, so and then I will measure right where her, where do you want to I do it from the
mid. So the book shows you, like, the book actually shows they drew like a little X mid-joint.
Mid-joint. Okay, so the
Not
mid,
in the nail,
Okay.
just mid-joint.
so the mid joint. So right at the tip of that finger, pretty
The
much.
tip of the thumb, yeah,
Okay.
middle of the tip.
The middle of the tip. There you go. So where it's actually touching, I would say she's at 9.5 centimeters opposition.
The norm would be that you would have full opposition, so there's no norm that we're gonna say on this one, just that you would have full opposition, so it's not a degree.
Okay, this is right. This is how your book shows you, right?
So you're measuring inches rather than a
Centimeters.
Centimeters.
Centimeters,
I'm
yes.
yeah.
Centimeters. You usually do centimeters. So if she's only getting to here, you know that she doesn't have full opposition, right? She's actually doing more flexion if she does it that way. Because opposition is that you are coming into palmar abduction and you are turning your thumb towards your middle finger. Okay, so there's your opposition.
If they're able to have full opposition.
That's not opposition, that's flexion.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is opposition. Your thumb has actually got to come and turn towards your middle finger for that to be technical opposition.
Okay.
Okay, so it's not just palmar abduction, which is you're actually turning and opposing that thumb, a little bit of that rotation. This, although you might have been taught that way, that's flexion, not opposition. So this is composite thumb flexion, and then this is opposition. So when you do this, you're opposing. Some people measure from their small finger to their thumb, but your book shows this other way.
Can you show palmar abduction versus opposition again?
It's pretty similar. So here's palmar abduction, and I pretty much call that the same thing. Opposition, you have a little bit more, this is technical, turning of that thumb towards that middle finger. Whereas palmar abduction is strictly in that plane of motion. But I call pretty much palmar abduction and opposition the same thing. Very technical, that little bit of rotation.
And the book shows you to the 5th digit.
Does it? Well, perfect. Okay, so then I'll show you how the book shows you. Like that, and then from
So
the
they do
middle.
the same thing, but they measure to the tip of the, middle of the tip of the 5th, the middle of the thumb.
Okay, so another way you can measure it is your hand is flat on the table, and you go ahead and you bring your thumb and small finger together. So you see how you kind of went across? I want you to come up nice and tall for me. Good, pure there. So then she would have full opposition. If there's a gap between there, I would measure it from the tip to the tip of the mid tip of the finger to the other tip. So then she would have 1.5 centimeters.
So you can ask them to do this first.
Yeah, and that would be full
So
opposition.
you don't have to use the ruler at all.
No, that would be full.
Do you say they have a deficit of like 1 centimeter or whatever?
Lacking,
Okay.
that's how I would report it. Position, yeah. So if you do that motion versus just pure palmar abduction, you see how it comes in just a little bit more for that opposition. Whoever was asking that. Okay. Opposition. Okay, MP flexion and IP and extension. All right, so we are form and wrist is in neutral. My axis is my MP joint, what I'm measuring. Good, and go ahead and, can they do this compositely? They can. Go ahead and flex that finger down. Can they do it composite?
Yeah.
Okay. So if I was doing it where I was isolating it, I would have to hold this joint, but you guys are going to be able to do it with MP flexion and IP flexion at the same time. So go ahead and touch the base of your small finger. This is how I function. This is how I always measure it. Touch the base of your small finger like that, and then if they can't, then you're going to see that they don't, what they're lacking of the MP joint. So my axis is on top of that MP, right on top dorsal side of the MP. My stationary is right parallel to that first metacarpal, so right on that first metacarpal. Then I'm going to pull my goniometer right on that proximal phalanx. So she's got 65 degrees of MP flexion. Do you see how my goniometer hits the table? If it was stopping because of the table and she still had more, I would have to bend this goni to get that fully flat on that first for that first proximal phalanx. You see that? So just because your goni stops doesn't mean that you're going to get that point correct. So you got to be aware of the goni you're using. Sometimes with this, you've got to bend the goni. Another way you'd be able to do it is stabilize with your elbow on the table. Go ahead and bend that finger over for me. Good. So then I can dorsally, there's my axis right on the MP joint. I am in right on top of my first metacarpal, all the way flat on the metacarpal, and and then I'm all the way flat on that proximal phalanx. Same thing with extension, same thing. Go ahead and pull your finger back, extend for me. Good. Once again, this is a difficult goni versus a finger goniometer because it's so long. So then I would do the same thing. And the problem with this goni, you see how that's hitting her with the second. So she actually has a little bit of hyperextension. With this goni, I couldn't measure dorsally. So what I would do, go ahead and pull your finger back. I'm not going to say don't have hyperextension because my goni doesn't account for it. I'm going to visualize it and I'm going to come to the side here. So I'm going to be right, go ahead and extend for me. Good. I'm going to put my axis right at that MP joint and I am literally just right on top of that. I'm really parallel with that first metacarpal. Good. And then I'm parallel with the proximal phalanx. Good. So I'm actually on the side and then she has about 7 degrees of hyperextension. So you see I moved from dorsally then to the lateral side where I'm just literally parallel with that first, with that metacarpal and first proximal phalanx versus then doing it dorsally. Depending on what goni I have, depends on how I measure usually. The dorsally is much easier if you have the finger goni, but a lot of times I'll be doing it from the lateral sides. All right, so that's your MP flexion and extension, and now IP flexion extension, same thing. Dorsally, you are going to be, so either way, a lot of times, like I said, I do it whenever I am measuring MP flexion and IP flexion at the same time. If I wasn't, I would stabilize it and then have her do the motion. Good. And then I would put my goni on that, my axis is my IP joint. Dorsally, my stationary arm is on the proximal phalanx, and then my movable arm is on the distal phalanx. But we're going to allow you to do it in compositely, which means MP and IP at the same time, because that's how I usually do it. So go ahead and bend that thumb over to that small finger. Great. And I'm dorsally going to put my axis right on the IP joint. My stationary arm is flat on the proximal phalanx. And then my movable arm is midway through the distal phalanx. Good. I'm going to support it. And you have 64 degrees of IP flexion.
So are these possible with like the full moon ones? Not the
Full moon, you got to go laterally. But